on the program. Welcome.
Thank you for having me in difficult times, indeed, as such as we have.
It is difficult times, and they say you need difficult times. And what does difficult times do? It makes good people, strong people, in order to get better, to appreciate the good times, isn't it? In South Africa, the South African Council of Churches, a press statement, I was just going through it last night. It was dated the 15th of July, and you gave the number of fatalities at that time. And you used the words senselessly lost to this mayhem. You think all of this could have been prevented, Bishop?
Well, I'm sure that any unnatural death where people are killed by circumstances that they could have been prevented, yes, indeed, it could have been prevented. We have to find out how actually so many people would have died. I mean, I heard you say that the numbers have been scaled down from 300 to 251. That, even if it was just one person, that was one too many.
Yeah.
You know, we went to this mall at Meadowlands where 11 people died, and some of these people died in the stampede, but some of them would have been killed perhaps by shots. We don't know. So I think that we need a full account of how all these have died, so that we can then say what is preventable in that context. But those that were killed at Phoenix, or any of those what appears to be vigilante killings, they call for a deeper resource of compassion for the people that are living with that experience. Listening to the stories at Phoenix is frightening, but especially because these are communities that must live together. Somehow we have to find a way of, not only doing the justice that is needed for those communities and make sure that all those that have been aggrieved find justice, but also then be able to make it possible for people to live together and be able to find the healing that is necessary. It's a lot of work, and my understanding is that there are also political issues at play, which unfortunately may make it more difficult to find the healing that is necessary. But I think the churches and other faith communities are working on this, and we hope that we'll be able to get through it in the next couple of weeks.
Bishop, we've seen a lot of destruction. Many lives have been lost. There are families who are watching us now who are mourning. They are wondering, how did my child die? How did this all start? Some of the questions that they're grappling with. Who should be held accountable? Guide us through how we can best answer these questions.
I was listening to Ukhozi the other day, and I hear this person saying, and the radio was talking about these deaths, and people were sort of expressing their sorrow and mourning about the people that they've lost. So the person from Nutu says, I was ready to be the first in the looting spree if only it began at Nutu. So I was waiting to hear, hey, let's go. And it didn't happen. Nobody started the looting at Nutu. And I thought I'd lost out, but now I'm grateful I didn't, because I don't know if I would be alive if I had gone. Now, it does say that there are a diversity of reasons why people went into their deaths in this way. One seems to be that somehow somebody instigated a kind of a looting spree, and that probably, from what we're hearing, it was kind of like orchestrated and planned in different parts where people would come and break in and then invite people to come in. I don't know how far through this is, the investigators will tell. But then it then brought people to a situation where it's almost like, because of the hunger and the poverty in our society, it just needed, I call it a dry timber that's ready for the match to strike. that then will make people come because they're looking for something to eat. And so that's part of the reason why I was saying they should not destroy what has been recovered. It must be given humanitarian organizations so that people who are in need can get it. So I would say that part of the causes has to do with the instigators, but also part of it has to do with the reality of poverty, hunger, and want, but also greed, because some just went there because of greed. And all of this came together. And then the third one is vigilantism. Vigilantism that says, some will say the vigilantism happens because the police were not there for whatever reason. The fact is that some people acted as vigilantes and started attacking and killing other people.
Yeah. With regards to the current level of concern, Bishop, the current outcry, the outrage from citizens about the lives lost due to the unrest, how does the outcry compare to past events that led to lives lost in our country? Are you surprised by the level of outcry?
I'm not surprised by the level of outcry, but I think that you must also pull this together with the nature of these occurrences in the last couple of weeks. That you look, I mean, the scale of it was just incredible. I mean, you had hordes upon hordes of people going. Now, there is something else that I do not know how far true it is, but you never know with these social media posts. But there is a post that shows people, throwing slippery oil onto the floor of a mall. And that would then lead to people rushing in there and falling, and therefore a stampede, and some people can be run over. That's why I say we need to know how some of these people died. Are there people that were killed in stampedes? And if that were the case, how did those stampedes actually happen? Is it because somebody callously and deliberately ensured that whoever runs and walks onto that mall will fall, and others people will be killed? So because of the nature, there hasn't been a time in this country where 300 people have died in 1 week in an event such as this. So it is actually quite unique. Yes, we've had massacres before, but those were focused like Sharpeville, like Marikana, and it's an incident. But this is large scale across, and the numbers and the diversity of the ways in which people have died is bewildering. And that is why we think that we need a whole lot. In fact, there should be a parliamentary inquiry that will bring to the fore, because the parliament is supposed to be our representatives. They should ask the questions on our behalf, and we should get answers on how each of these people died and why.
Well, having said that, and just to rephrase the question I asked you earlier, what do you make of the outcry coming from political parties themselves, leaders of society? Is it enough?
I think that there are two ways in which people make their expressions. One is simply just making a statement, but we have to do more than that. And the question is, beyond, it's okay to make the statement, but what is our responsibility? So the outcry is okay, but there has to be action that is related to our responsibility, each one of us. If we don't do that, then we're leaving it to communities and societies to find their own way. I mean, look at what's happening in KZN. What happened at Phoenix has had an impact on what happens in the greater Inanda, and what happens even in Pietermaritzburg at Woodlands. And then, it leads to a tension, a racial tension, that it takes things totally in a different direction from where we started. And when we get politicians who do not recognize how important it is for them to come in and become the leaders that will help bring peace and direct with clear information, we won't have a problem. That's why I'm saying that Parliament is our representatives, and they must make their statements, but they must take responsibility for guiding society into the right direction. And we'll do what we can as civil society and religious organizations. We're working on an interfaith basis with all the other faiths that are participating, whose communities are affected.
Yeah. Look, and there's so much misinformation, isn't there, out there, Bishop? There is a recognition by the SACC, and it's something that you alluded to, that poverty encourages hungry people to not resist the opportunity to go and grab what they think will help them in the short term. But What do you make about those voice notes that are being shared, the social media posts that had a tendency to foment fear and panic? What do those point to?
I've listened to those. That's why I said that part of the blame goes to the instigators. Some of those voice notes are chilling. I mean, it's kind of like you say, what did this person smoke before they made this call? Some of those are chilling, threatening to kill. Others are saying, kill the Indians. Others are saying, kill the police. Others are saying, kill the judges. These are terrible things that are being said on voice notes. And somebody must know those voices and deal with them. But I think that is part of it. That's why I said to you, there was the instigation, there was orchestration, but there was also the reality of hunger that makes people come. But there's also greed. I mean, there are people that came there in trucks and vans to loot what they call things that have nothing to do with food. There's so many factors to it.
And all of this.
But those people that were instigating with those voice notes, if those voice notes people can be traced, they are responsible for much of the problem.
Yeah, and we're told there will be consequences with regards to those social media posts that incite violence.
I mean, if that voice note that talks about, attack Indians, what does it do if a majority Indian community listens to that? It makes them say, we protect ourselves. But then it gets even, as we hear in Phoenix, that even people that are supposed to be law enforcement are suspected of having been part of the killing of Africans in that community. So it then leads to a racial situation that we have to deal with once and for all. South Africa said we are going into a non-racial society, but nobody worked for it. We didn't do it. We lived as if nothing has changed. That's why we also have spatial apartheid that continues, where you got a concentration of one race in one area or the other. And these have continued. We have to deal with our society in a way that builds a future that all of us can embrace and belong together in. But it cannot be done by accident. It has to be a clear design, and we have to work now with the communities that are affected. The grief that is there must be dealt with, and those people have lost. I'm told there are people that cannot even go and get their loved ones from the mortuaries, and the mortuaries are full. And so the religious communities are working on that right now so that we can see how best to help these families.
Well, let's talk about that, and how do we work on this on a practical level, the impact of what has happened on the psyche and the moral fibre of our society. What is required now, Bishop, to get us to that better place? What do we need to embark on as a nation?
I can just say, to start off with, that there are too many initiatives trying to address these communities. And it is better for it not to have put that as an idea going down there. I'm going to Phoenix to do this. I'm going to Phoenix to do this. Because it does not help. And I understand now that there is a structure that's been created that tries to do, at least bring people together. The religious formations are working with them. And we'll be having, obviously, I've been invited to participate in some of the meetings over the next couple of days. But the idea is that there should be dialogue that will at least unpack some of the problems and deal with the fears on both sides, and be able to say, as a community, first of all, let's deal with the grief and those that have died. Let's then get to the justice issues. Who is responsible for what? Get those people into law enforcement processes. And then let's get to talk about how then the community can rebuild. Now, we have a family, for example, that I know, the Indian family of people that they call us. They say, we are in Phoenix. We live at the border with the African community. We've never had a problem. The problem comes from those who live further afield, and the further side of the Indians, and the further side of the Africans. They do not know how we coexist together here. So we need to build that coexistence spirit, and that's what healing is going to have to do. There are processes that the religious organizations are proposing. But there's also, as we know, lots of food insecurity in the area. That also needs support, so that we don't get a situation where food insecurity leads to greater tensions in the environment. So there are a number of things that need to be done. As I say, dialogue, justice, and of course dealing with the grief and the bereavement, but also then working with the communities to find some kind of healing processes. And this is what the religious communities are working on at this time. And that process is going into full gear in the coming week. There's a greater problem that people are talking about, the schools.
Yes.
There's a fear about the schools, about whether the opening of the schools is going to be helpful in that environment at this time, because the kids go to the same schools. And if there's these suspicions that, if a child who's coming is probably bringing a firearm, how do you deal with that? Can we have the schools in Phoenix open at the same time as other schools in this environment? This is a question that we will need to, the local communities are trying to address, but it has brought a greater urgency to dealing with the psyche of the community in a way that sort of reduces the tensions and reduces the suspicions of even a child walking into a school.
Yeah, I hear you, Bishop. And with regards to the nation-building aspect of it, I guess it talks to the fact that our strength really needs to be a function of our respect for one another, just to get us to that better place. And Bishop, all of this is happening during the country's third COVID-19 wave. There is a chance more people would have contracted COVID during the unrest. There's a possibility that more lives could be lost as a result. I pray to the divine that this doesn't happen, but there's a possibility that it would. How do we now, as a nation, face the consequences of violence, looting, and destruction on top of the deleterious effects of COVID-19?
We have to deal with it, in my view, from three fronts. The first one is that we need to do the law enforcement work that is required and make sure that is done as speedily as possible to bring stability. But the second thing that we need to do is to aggressively communicate the needs to live appropriately with the virus. We are going to live with this virus for some time. And so we need to know how to live with it appropriately. And what has happened in the last week is not helpful at all. And therefore, clearly we should expect, I'm told, and I did not listen to this, but I understand that some of the people that have been arrested have tested positive as they come into prisons. And that means that positive infection is there in mass amongst the people that were participating in this. And that is why we have to aggressively appeal to people to test, because if we don't do that, it's going to go wild in our communities. And the third thing that we need to do, I believe, is that then we have to take the lessons out of this and use the public broadcaster and all our communication platforms, including religious organizations, to actually have a communication about the problems that have led to where we are, and say, never again, nunca mais, as they say in Portuguese, not again, because if we don't do it every day, I believe there should be efforts, therefore, by civil society organizations of not only dealing with Phoenix, Inanda, and Woodlands, but also ensuring that there is a process of civil society awareness that makes sure that we don't again be drawn into the kind of thing that happened because somebody puts out a voice note. If we don't do that, I understand there's an initiative in Durban of people that want to put out alternative voice notes to every one of these negative voice notes that come out. Yeah. There's another initiative in Johannesburg that says let's work with our communities in the same way that they started with the protection of Maponya Mall. Yeah. Let's now start building and protecting actually getting involved in the IDPs of our municipalities. That the protection of our malls is just the beginning. But let's now begin to say, how else do we build our communities in a way that never again shall we be misled by voice notes?
Bishop, you are always welcomed on this platform to make the case in order to try and get us to a better place. And we thank you very much for your time and your insight this morning. Be well.
Thanks for having me.
All right. South African Council of Churches General Secretary Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana there giving us his take, his perspective of the current state of play here in South Africa. Who should be held accountable? How do we get to that better place? How do we answer the questions that many people are asking this morning?